Hello, everyone. As you're getting on, we're going to give, you've come to the right place if you're coming to the webinar hosted, facilitated by Working Family Solidarity. We're waiting another minute or two to let a few more attendees come in, but we'll start in just a couple minutes. Thanks. You've come to the right one. If you're coming to the one on evictions, we called it, What Are You Going to Do When the Eviction Moratorium Ends, and Fighting Back. So you'll see a couple of the panelists up here, and we'll wait a couple minutes for other people to get in. Give me half a second. I'm getting okay. That person got in. Someone was texting me about making sure they knew how to get in, and I think they just got in. Yes. Awesome. Ángeles, bienvenida. I'm glad you could make it. Qué bueno que estás. Claudia también. Qué bueno que estás. Esmeralda, qué bueno que estás. Evelyn, glad you could make it. James from Washington, D.C. Glad you could make it, James, with the Kalmanovitz Institute on Race and Poverty. Glad you made it, James. Kelly Suzanne, Woods Fund, glad you made it. Awesome. Let's see who else. Ángeles, Clau, Esmeralda, Evan, Guadalupe, bienvenida. Glad you could make it. Back of the yards in the house. Guadalupe. We'll give it an up. Okay, yeah, Monique. South side. Far south side. Glad you could make it, Monique. We'll start in just a minute. We're letting a couple more people get in, and then we'll go ahead and start. There were a fair amount of people signed up, and then not everyone gets on necessarily, but we'll give another minute or two, and then we'll just go ahead and start, and other people can come in. A couple of people also mentioned they had something that would end at 6, Reverend Campbell and some others, so they may not get on till like 6:15. So we'll wait we'll go one more minute till 6:06 on my computer, and then we'll just start. However many people we have, we'll just start. Welcome, come on in. We're gonna start in just a minute with Somos Sur, with We Are the South, with the folks doing the interpreting, who've been doing the interpreting now for 11 months. Including this teach-in, we'll have done 12 teach-ins or racial unity dialogues in the last 12 months. We're actually gonna take a break in August. Not so much because we're tired, but I think we've been kind of getting a lot of people pushing them once a month for a long, long time. So we're gonna kind of give everyone a little break and then resume after that. So let's see who else got on before we start here, so I can say hi. That looks like maybe Reverend Campbell's phone number, maybe. Rev, maybe you had to call in. That's cool. Adriana, thanks for making it. And you had mentioned you might not get on. We're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to go ahead and start. We had I think we had 26 people that were registered. But again, things come up. And some people might come on late. We're going to go ahead and start. But before I do the official welcome and introduction so that everyone can understand it, antes de que yo haga la bienvenida oficial y la introducción oficial, we're going to have the interpreters let people know how to use the interpreter function, and then we'll cut loose. So Somos Sur, Cristal, Crystal Zaragoza, and Eva Cárdenas are going to take us through the interpretation function, and then we'll begin the presentation.
Good afternoon, muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Eva y estoy con Cristal. My name is Eva and I'm here with Cristal, and we will be your interpreters for today y vamos a ser sus intérpretes hoy. Súper rápido, el modo de interpretación no está aprendido ahorita, pero en un momento lo vamos a aprender. Solamente queremos repasar unas ciertas cosas con ustedes para que nos puedan ayudar a hacer este espacio multilingüe. So thank you all very much. The interpretation feature is not turned on yet. We want to go over with you all around a few things that will create this space, a multilingual space. And so we want to just walk with you all very quickly through these. You'll just hear me interchange in names, and then we'll just go over the instructions. Si usted está ocupando su computadora en Zoom, cuando prendamos el modo de interpretación va a haber un globo terráqueo al fondo de su pantalla, donde puede entonces ahí seleccionar su idioma. Si está ocupando Zoom por parte de un teléfono o una tablet, entonces lo que tiene que hacer es hacer clic en el icono que tiene 3 puntos y ahí escoger el servicio de interpretación y después el idioma en el que usted se siente más cómodo. So once we turn on the interpretation feature, if you are using Zoom on your computer, you will see a globe icon that will appear at the bottom of your screen. That's where you have to click in order to select the language that you're comfortable with and click done to ensure that the interpretation feature is on. If you're using a smartphone or a tablet, then you'll see a more or a 3-dot icon at the bottom of your screen. And there you can select language interpretation and then the language that you are comfortable with, making sure to click done so that the interpretation feature is works. Durante el evento le estamos pidiendo a los participantes que por favor hablen una persona a la vez. Esto nos va a ayudar a nosotros a interpretar y no tener que elegir a quién interpretar. So during the event, we're asking people to please speak one at a time. That way the interpreters don't have to choose who to interpret for. Si usted está hablando, le pedimos que hable en una voz alta y clara, especialmente si tiene micrófonos, teniendo en cuenta qué tan cerca está el micrófono, qué tan lejos. We're also asking people to please speak up loud and clear, especially for folks who are using microphones or headphones with microphones, to be mindful of how close, how far your microphone is, and that will allow us to interpret better. Lo último es que por favor hablen en una voz despacia y moderada, tomando una respiración después de cada oración y haciendo una pausa entre ideas. Esto apoya no solamente a los intérpretes, pero a todos en el espacio. And then lastly, we're asking folks to please speak at a slow, moderate pace, making sure to take a breath after each sentence or a pause after a thought is finished. This will allow not just the interpreters, but everyone in this space. Y pues nada, cualquier cosa, si tienen algún problema, cuando prendamos el servicio de interpretación, por favor póngalo en el chat y así le podemos asistir. And so once we turn the feature on, the interpretation feature on, if you have issues accessing it, please drop it in the chat and that way one of us can get to you all. So podemos prender el servicio de interpretación. We can now turn on the interpretation feature y muchas gracias and thank you.
Okay. So we will go ahead then and see if we can get this rolling with Eva. Let's see. Cristal. Okay, you guys let me know if this works.
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I am technologically somewhat inept, but I've become a little bit apt by having to do this. So a quick then official welcome. My name is Leone Jose Bicchieri. I'm the Executive Director of Working Family Solidarity. Our mission is to unite low and moderate income workers of different backgrounds, especially African American and Latinx, to fight together for equitable development. We do that primarily by focusing on the area of jobs and housing. We've done a series of webinars and racial justice teach-ins and racial unity dialogues over the past 12 months, especially since it's been hard to meet in person. And tonight we're looking at evictions. I'm going to keep the welcome brief so we can hear from 3 great panelists and then also have time for questions and comments. And the idea is that we can learn a little bit more about when the eviction moratorium is set to end, might be extended to, but also begin at least to understand what the eviction process is like and what are going to be ways that we can fight back. And so if your landlord talks to you, what can you do? How can you stay in touch with us or any of the other great organizations, you know, on this call? How can you stay in touch with us so that we can refer you as well to other terrific housing organizations? So our belief, again, is that we need to work together as workers who sell our labor every day when we get up, right? And between the low wages we get and the high rent, we're slowly being driven out of cities like Chicago. We happen to believe that's a plan, that's not an accident, and that too many landlords are going to take advantage of that during COVID. So we're going to move now to having our terrific panelists speak for a certain amount of time each. I think a couple of them may have some slides. And then after that, we'll have time for questions and for comments. Our first panelist, we'll get right to her. I'm very proud because she's a colleague of mine, works with me at Working Family Solidarity, our community organizer, Sharon Norwood, who has a tremendous amount of experience, unfortunately, dealing with some really tough housing issues, and then also organizing around those issues. And she's going to talk about some of the things that we're doing to fight back with a city ordinance and other things. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Sharon Norwood.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Leonie. So basically, I want to talk today about the things that I personally have went through dealing with the pandemic when it comes to the ordinances of what I found that we as people need in place. So the first thing that I was fortunate to be able to be a part of was the RTLO, that was the Residential Landlord Tenant Ordinance, that I was working with CAFA, with Gianna and Patricia, and HCP, that's Housing Choice Voucher Partners. And with that, we were successfully able to get the RTLO passed, and that was to basically stop renters from being locked out. And I say that because with me being a former Housing Choice Voucher holder, I had that issue. If that was in place at the time, I would have never been able to have been locked out. The locks would have been changed on me. I would have been able to obtain my stuff, my belongings when I decided to leave the home. A lot of issues went on with me as a Housing Choice Voucher. For 6 years, let's be clear, I didn't want to end up in that position, and I don't believe anybody does. So for 6 years, I personally searched for a home to rent with my Housing Choice Voucher. And I went through a tremendous amount of discrimination. And for the most part, what was told to me was, we don't take Housing Choice Vouchers here. You're not gonna be able to afford this rent with Section 8 over here. And that's what I got. And so I had to make a decision to give up my voucher in order to stay in the neighborhood that I wanted to live in and raise my children in. I have been here, I live in Evergreen Park, Illinois, and I've been here 11 years already. So with that being said, I didn't want to uproot my children and my life and my family and my business and leave. I wanted to stay where I was. I was comfortable with the system of how it worked. The next thing that we had on our plate was the SOI. That's what we're working on right now currently, and that is the source of income bill. And what we're doing with that right now, we're rallying much support from senators, trying to get all the senators on board to get that passed. And the reason why we need that, and it's so important, because what we have found as a renter, like most of us, most of you, I have a landlord who is not receptive to the emergency rental program. He refuses to accept this program. And what we're finding is he's not the only one. And what we've come to think is, well, the main reason is they know that if they sign that paper saying that they're willing to accept this money, that they can't do anything to the tenant can't be removed, they can't take the tenant to landlord-tenant court. So that's a big issue right now. So what we're trying to do is get this source of income bill passed, whereas if it was passed right now, we wouldn't be in this situation, whereas landlords would be able to take us to landlord-tenant court and put us out, because they would have that protection from the rental assistance program, the tenants would, and they would be able to use that money to pay their rent. The landlords would have to accept it, so it wouldn't be a valid excuse to evict someone. So these are one of the many things that we have worked on and that we're continuing to work on, and that we're asking people to support. Contact their senators and ask them to get behind this bill, because it's important. We need these type of protections, and and what we have to remember is we are the people that employ them, and we have to remind them that you're in office because of me, and I need you to work for me, not just the big guy. I need you to do something for me to protect me. It's not our fault that COVID came in and shut down everything and changed everybody's lives, but it seems like the little man, the little people are the ones that are getting the butt of everything. So with these protections that we are lining up, that we have in place, these are those are just two. Another one that we have that we're working diligently on is called Just Cause. Just Cause is something that's been around for many years with rental. It's ridiculous. We need this Just Cause put in place, because they can, the same thing. These are all different parts of basically the same thing of a rental protection. The landlords can take us to court for any reason and put us out. And that's something that we've been working diligently on as well. So these are things that are key and vital for us as renters, and low-income wage earners, people with disability, people who rely on alimony, Social Security, child support, those things, to pay our bills, basically to pay our rent. We need these type of protections to keep a roof over our head, less more food on our table. That's a really huge problem as well. So these are the things that we are working on. I'm pleased that the RTLO has passed. I'll be even more pleased when we get the Just Cause passed and the SOI bill passed. So anybody got any questions?
So we're gonna actually hold off on questions till the end of the three panelists. Sorry about that, but that way we can kind of take them all together at the very end. But thank you very much, Sharon. And again, I mean, I think we heard, three specific things from Sharon. So again, the idea is, none of us has the answer, but there's a whole bunch of different great efforts, the source of income, the just cause for eviction, the RTLO that Sharon was talking about, and all of these things. A lot of people have been working a long time to not allow landlords to simply kick people out when they want. So obviously with COVID now, unfortunately, it's like eviction squared, right? It's gone to the nth degree. So, and Sharon's been working for many years, and we're thrilled to have her working with Working Family Solidarity now. And we're going to keep, the just cause for eviction is a push at a city ordinance that we hope we can pass. If you want to know anything more about this, follow up. I think you automatically have my email, and then I can put you in touch with Sharon to learn how you can keep supporting, or with a lot of other great groups. We're members of the Chicago Housing Justice League, and we're really pushing for that just cause for eviction, among other things. And our next panelist is Gianna Baker, and we're thrilled to have her with us. She's co-director of the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance, and Gianna's going to talk about, the disparate negative impact on people of color that eviction crises always bring, and other related issues. So Gianna, I'm thrilled to have you with us. Please take it away.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. If you just give me a moment, I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint.
For you, we have 2 moments. We can see it.
Okay. Okay. In a good place now. And so I am with the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance, and our mission is to combat housing discrimination and promote equitable place-based opportunity through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. And what that simply means is that we know that your zip code determines so many factors in your life. So depending on where you live, you can have access to certain schools, you get access to grocery stores. And what we want to make sure of as an organization is that we're, one, combating housing discrimination, and then two, that we are bringing together our members really to focus on equitable investment in communities of color. And I'm going to talk a little more about that today. So what we seek to do at the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance is to build power for housing justice. And what that looks like is we have nearly 50 member organizations like Working Family Solidarity, the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing, and then most importantly, community groups that are representing those who are directly impacted by housing instability and housing discrimination. And what we have done over the years as working in partnership with these groups is to build coalitions that have successfully passed historic protections for renters. And so most recently, we worked with Sharon Norwood and others throughout Cook County to pass the Cook County Residential Tenant Landlord Ordinance. Working Family Solidarity and Lawyers Committee for Better Housing were involved in that campaign. And what that did was to create protections for renters in suburban Cook County. So in Chicago, Mount Prospect, and Evanston, there have been protections for renters for decades. And we were finally able to get those protections for renters throughout Cook County. We also, a few years back, worked with Working Family Solidarity to pass the Just Housing Amendment to the Cook County Human Rights Ordinance. And what those protections have done is to ensure that those who have arrest and conviction records and their families have a fair chance to find a good place to call home in Cook County. And so there are many campaigns we've worked on, and I highlight these victories because as we are looking now at this eviction crisis, as the moratorium comes to an end, I really want us to focus and to keep thinking about what do we do collectively to build power, because that's what we're going to have to do in the midst of this crisis. And so let's talk a bit about that. So the first thing that I always emphasize, and it's something that has been very frustrating to me, is that when we are listening in the media and they're talking about the eviction moratorium coming to an end, oftentimes they are using this phrase, looming eviction crisis. And that really frustrates me because we're not facing a looming eviction crisis. The truth is that for communities of color, we've been experiencing a housing and economic crisis for decades that is rooted in government-sponsored discriminatory housing policies like redlining, restrictive covenants, contract buying, zoning policies that created a hierarchy of value both at the individual level and the community level based on race and ethnicity. And because of those policies, there's a racial wealth gap, and communities of color therefore have been experiencing evictions, displacement, and an affordable housing crisis for years. And so I just want to talk a bit about what that looks like. First looking at where we were prior to COVID, and then looking at where we are at now that we are still in this pandemic. So when we look at where we were prior to COVID, the first thing we have to consider is that many Black and Latinx households are cost burdened. And specifically for renters, what that means is that it's a family that's spending more than 30% of their income on housing. In other words, after these individuals and families pay their rent, they're often struggling to pay for groceries, healthcare costs like prescriptions and doctor visits, and transportation to get to work. So already we saw that there was a struggle for many of households of color. In addition to that, there are high eviction rates among communities of color, and especially Black women-headed households. In Chicago, renters that are living in Black neighborhoods are 4 times as likely to face eviction as renters in predominantly white neighborhoods. And what happens when we talk about evictions is there's a stigma tied to it. And sometimes it's spoken of, especially, and I say this from the perspective of having to be in a room sometimes when we are fighting for bills and we're hearing from the landlord lobbyist. When evictions are talked about, sometimes there can be this discussion that people are just refusing to pay their rent. And we know that that's not the case, right? When an eviction occurs, it's really just a result of poverty. It's a result of families being cost burdened. It's a result of us seeing our rates for rent increasing while wages have remained stagnant. And so not only do these families then experience eviction, which can lead then to experiencing homelessness, once a family has an eviction filing, which is a public record, that can also create long-term barriers to housing. What happens is that tenant screening companies oftentimes are taking eviction filings, and again, just an eviction filing is just a public record. It doesn't say whether or not there was a negative judgment. It just says that there was an eviction that was filed. And that information then appears in tenant screening reports. And so as landlords are looking at an application, if they then see that a person has an eviction, then oftentimes those are people who may be denied housing. And so with that, we see a huge barrier. And as I said, Black women face evictions at very high rates, and oftentimes these are women with children. In addition to eviction rates, there's been a mass exodus of Black households in the Chicago area. So when we look just, for example, at 2000 to 2010, there were nearly 200,000 Black households who left Chicago. And then to further think through what we're seeing in terms of housing, we have to talk about gentrification, right? So when we look at gentrification, whether we're talking about Logan Square, Pilsen, Southside neighborhoods, we're seeing that communities of color are being displaced from the community. And these are all factors prior to COVID. I also want to highlight the experiences of people with disabilities. So like many communities of color, people with disabilities are oftentimes disproportionately cost burdened. Many people receive Social Security income or Social Security disability income, which is a very small amount per month. And with that said, they're struggling month to month to be able to afford to live. In addition to that, in Chicago, we have a problem where many of our shelters are inaccessible to people with mobility disabilities. So what that looks like is if you are a person who uses a wheelchair and you're experiencing homelessness, many of the shelters in Chicago are not accessible to you. So that's just giving us a brief overview of what we're facing right now, and this is all prior to COVID. Now, when we look at where we're at because of COVID, we know that Black and brown households had high rates of COVID infection and death. And again, this is going back to those who are the frontline workers who still had to go out and work. It's going back to even as families are struggling with being cost burdened. Oftentimes these are intergenerational households, and so there that even makes it more difficult too when we think about people being impacted by COVID. So many people during this period of time experience permanent or temporary job loss. And then because of, again, where I go back to saying this historic housing and economic crisis, or if we just look at it from the perspective of the racial wealth gap, these are the families that have fewer assets to begin with. And so when there is a crisis like COVID, it's even more of a challenge for these families to still keep making it and go through this. So let's talk a little bit now about evictions and fair housing and how the two are related. So at the federal level, we have the Fair Housing Act, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, national origin, sex, familial status, and disability. In addition to the Fair Housing Act, we have the Illinois Human Rights Act. At the county level, there's the Cook County Human Rights Ordinance. And then we also at the city level have protections. And what these anti-discrimination protections do, again, is to ensure that people are not experiencing housing discrimination. However, what we've seen in terms of evictions is that those who are disproportionately impacted by evictions are members of protected classes. And so those are Black and Latinx households, female-headed households, families with children, and people with disabilities. And so we see there that kind of relationship. What we've also seen with this is desperate impact. And so I just want to take a moment to kind of discuss what desperate impact looks like. And I think talking about it from the lens of eviction filings might be the best way to do that. So when we look at fair housing laws, there are sometimes neutral policies that disproportionately impact protected classes. And so when that is occurring, even though that policy may be neutral, that policy could still be then violating the Fair Housing Act. One thing that some fair housing attorneys have been working towards is trying to see, really with advocating for eviction filings to go into that category, specifically tenant screening companies using eviction filings in making decisions about whether or not to accept a prospective tenant. And the reason that there would be a desperate impact is because so many of those eviction filings are impacting people of color, and especially female-headed households, and then families with children. And families with children would fall into the category of familial status. In addition to this, I want to highlight just a few fair housing laws and then renters' rights that we should be considering right now as we're in the midst of this housing crisis. So the first thing I want to talk about is sexual harassment. And in the Fair Housing Act and then our local protections, sex is considered a protected class, and that includes sexual harassment. And what we've seen, even a report that came out today from the National Fair Housing Alliance is showing that there has been an uptick in tenants experiencing sexual harassment. And a lot of that is coming out of situations where maybe a person is struggling to pay rent. And then as quid pro quo, a landlord may say, well, if you do this favor, then you won't have to pay. And so I just want to highlight some situations that you should be familiar with in terms of looking at whether or not sexual harassment is occurring. And so sexual harassment can be situations where even a landlord might refuse to help a tenant if they report, or excuse me, it is illegal for landlords, property managers, agents, or other housing providers to ask for anything sexual instead of paying rent, fees, or other costs associated with housing, to refuse to help a tenant if they report sexual harassment, to threaten a tenant for reporting sexual harassment. So an example of that is saying that they will evict or call immigration if a tenant reports sexual harassment, demand sexual acts in return for repairs or maintenance, and then even making sexual comments about a tenant. And so with these situations, I'm going to provide my contact information at the end of this PowerPoint. If you have experienced sexual harassment, you can get in contact with me, and then I can refer you to a fair housing agency that can support you. What we found sometimes is that people may not know that this is a right, and so they may seek assistance for some other housing concern that they're having, and then in the process of talking about what occurred, then that's when a story comes up where there has been a situation where the person might have experienced sexual harassment. Another law that I want to highlight is the Illinois Immigrant Tenant Protection Act. And this is a state law that the Latino Policy Forum and other organizations fought for. And under this law, it is illegal for landlords to harass, threaten, and evict tenants based on perceived immigration or citizenship status. And landlords cannot require tenants to share their immigration status. What we do know happens sometimes is even in situations where a person might be living in unsafe housing conditions and they report those, there are landlords who then, in some of those situations, make threats that they will call immigration. And so I just want to highlight as well with that is illegal. And Latino Policy Forum is the best organization to get in contact with. But again, I'll have my information at the end so that you can get support if that issue has impacted you. Finally, I wanted to talk more about source of income protections, which Sharon, as she spoke earlier, highlighted these laws. So in Cook County and Chicago, we have source of income protections, which makes it illegal for housing providers to discriminate against a person for having a legal source of income. And examples of that could be wages, housing subsidies, rental assistance, Social Security, disability, child support, alimony. what's critical in understanding this is that the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance works with housing choice voucher holders in a working group, because even though we have these laws on the books, renters are oftentimes discriminated against. And as Sharon talked about, it could be situations where a landlord is saying no Section 8. And when we look at the demographics of the majority of those who are voucher holders, whether we look at it through the Chicago Housing Authority or the Housing Authority of Cook County, most of those families are Black. And many of them are concentrated in predominantly Black neighborhoods in Chicago, because even as they have tried to move to other communities, they have experienced discrimination. And so we do a lot of work at the local level to try to ensure that those laws are enforced. But in addition to that, we're now working on a state law in partnership with Working Family Solidarity and others, through the Illinois Coalition for Fair Housing, to advocate for those sorts of income protections to exist. And the reason why it's so critical for us to get those, to get a state law passed is, one, it will help us to have more resources for education and enforcement, even at the local level in Cook County and Chicago, as we already have those laws. But also what we've seen, just as Sharon shared earlier, is that even as we've had the rollout of emergency rental assistance at the state level, at the county level, at the city level, there have been situations where landlords have still refused to receive that rental assistance. And so that kind of refusal to receive that rental assistance would fall into source of income protections. And so we want to make sure that people are being protected. And then also what we've seen now as a trend through COVID is that those industries that are considered more unstable now have sometimes had challenges finding housing, because landlords will deny them, because they might say, well, if the person, for instance, works in a hospitality industry, that they think that person is in an unstable job. And so we want to make sure, and as a part of a work that we're already doing here locally in Cook County and Chicago, to then get the state law passed. And let me just say this too with the state law. The state law, there have been coalitions for years trying to get protections passed at the state level. As a matter of fact, there was a campaign that I was involved in 2017. What is so different this time around, as we've been seeking to get this law passed, is that typically there's been so much opposition from landlords and the realtor lobby that we haven't even been able to get a bill out of committee. What happened this year that was so hopeful and exciting to all of us is that this law went through the House. It was passed. There weren't any changes to the law. It went through just as it had been written, and that alone is really powerful. But then once the law, or the bill, excuse me, went to the House, we experienced significant challenges to get it out of committee and to actually get our representatives, our state representatives, to vote on it. And so I'm saying all of this because what's key as we go forward, we want to make sure that we get this law passed. It's not only going to help us right now as we're looking at the eviction moratorium coming to an end, but it's going to be helpful for us as we look long-term to this housing crisis that we've been experiencing and mass displacement of people of color and poor households in Chicago. And so just as some closing thoughts, again, I want to encourage you to get involved in these campaigns. I go back again to the work that we have been doing with the organizations on this line to build power. Yes, we know that we face realtors, they're lobbyists and the lobbyists of large landlords, but what we know is that as we bring people together, that we've been able to build the power to pass many historic laws, and that's what we want to continue to do. And so as you look here, this is my contact information. You can reach out to me if you need more details about some of the housing rights that I discussed tonight, or if you want to get involved with these campaigns. What I will also do, I know there will be an email to follow up with people who participated tonight, and I will make sure that there's a packet that goes into more detail about fair housing laws. I couldn't cover everything tonight, and I do want to make sure that you get information on even some of the other laws that we've talked about, like the Cook County Residential Tenant Landlord Ordinance. So thank you so much, Leonie, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Gianna. And so I will proudly add that I'm a member of the board of directors at the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance, and I'm really proud of that. It's a great group. So we've heard Sharon talking about several types of fights, the source of income, the just cause for eviction, and other things she's been involved with. Gianna talked about both of those and added some more about just how people of color are the first to go, last to get a rent. And so you might think, well, yeah, but I thought we were going to talk about the moratorium. But I think Sharon's point and Gianna's point is that these are all related. In other words, like Sharon and I were talking about, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, you know, COVID-19 did not invent and start the gross inequalities in our society, but COVID-19 has helped expose them. And if we don't fight together to have stronger laws and stronger rights for tenants, who again, we see in our organization as low and moderate income workers just trying to survive, if we don't have that, then every time there's a crisis, we're going to have it even worse than we normally do. And so what they're talking about are the kinds of things that we need to strengthen all the time. And in addition, as you, if you're listening, or friends that you can talk with may or may not face eviction, but even if it's COVID-19 related, you may find that some of the things that Sharon and Gianna have been talking about can still help you in your fight. So they may go and it may say, well, you're behind on your rent and time to go and the eviction moratorium's up, but you may have heard something that Sharon and Gianna were talking about, that, you know, protected classes, you know, and so on, right, that help you mount your defense. So again, we're going to move ahead in the webinar, but these are all interrelated, and you can follow up with us. We'll send out an email again to everyone who's on this webinar, and we'll include everyone's name, and we'll include the information from the different organizations, okay? So now we're going to move ahead, and we're going to have Antoinette Bolz, who's with the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing, and she's with the Chicago COVID-19 Eviction Prevention Project, which is very important, and she's going to help us understand some of the things that could be coming our way pretty soon, and other ideas about how we can fight back. Antoinette, it's great to have you. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I just want to go over the eviction court process with everyone, so you know what to expect if, you know, your landlord is trying to evict you. As was mentioned, the eviction moratorium is going to end on the 31st of July, so it's going to end in 2 days. If you live in the suburbs, that means there is no more eviction moratorium. However, the city of Chicago does have an extended moratorium for an additional 60 days. So some of the laws I'm about to go over, they differ between the suburbs and the city. So I'll try to bear in mind and point out the differences between the city and the suburbs. And the first thing you can expect is what a landlord has to do. And again, not all landlords are going to follow the law, but what they have to do is they have to provide you notice. Now, they have to require they can provide you notice for 3 reasons. The first is for non-payment of rent. They're required to give you a minimum of 5 days notice. What that means, it does not mean that the sheriff is going to show up at your door in 5 days. What it means is that the landlord must wait at least 5 days before they can file an eviction against you. Now, all of these notices, they must be in writing. What else? But yeah, it's a 5-day notice for non-payment of rent. The second notice is for a violation. So it could mean the landlord is accusing you of, say, violating something in the lease agreement. And again, they may or may not be true. It's your decision on how you want to handle that. And then the third notice that they can give you is a termination of tenancy notice. And now the timing of this depends on the length of your tenancy, and this law also varies between city and the suburbs. I have some of the notes in Spanish as well, but Spanish is my second language, so some of the vocab might not be correct or kind of wonky. All right, so the first notice would be for non-payment of rent. Again, they have to give you at least a minimum of 5-day notice. They can give you more, but it has to be a 5-day notice in writing, and it's for non-payment of rent. Now, there's a couple of things you can do to try to solve the problem. First, if you have the amount that they're claiming and you believe that the amount that they're claiming is correct, you can pay the full amount if you just happen to have that. Or of course, there might be other variables too as to why you might not want to pay it, such as, say, conditions issues, such as, say, maybe the landlord turned off your heat or electricity or is not fixing a mold problem. If you have a portion of the rent, you can also try to pay a portion. Now, the landlord does not have to accept a portion of the rent. If you give them the full amount of rent, they have to accept that. It's mandatory for them to accept it and to forfeit all eviction attempts if that is the claim that they're basing it on. Or if you live in the city of Chicago and you do not have the funds, you can notify them in writing that you've been financially impacted by COVID-19. Again, this only applies to the city. It does not apply to the suburbs. Now, this is going to last through September 30th or through September 30th. The writing can be through an email or a text message. It does not need to be a formal letter or notarized or anything. It's fine if you just send them a text message. Have some samples that you can just say, I've been unable to pay my rent because I've been financially affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, it can just be a text message. You have to send it to them before that 5 days is up. So make sure once you get that 5-day notice to just send them that notice that you have been financially affected by COVID-19. Now, if you do give them that notice of COVID-19 impact, what that does is it requires the landlord to extends that notice from 5 days to 12 days. So it gives you an additional 7 days before the landlord can actually file an eviction against you. It is the landlord's duty, it is their job, not your job, but their job to reach out to you and try to make a payment plan or discuss a resolution with you beforehand. They may not request information such as retirement accounts or assets or personal property, so you don't need to disclose a lot of things, just need to try to work out a payment plan with them. And any agreement that you reach must be in writing. And then if a resolution is not reached, then the landlord may file an eviction against you. Now, for a violation notice, it requires a minimum of 10 days. So it can be, it could vary. They may or may not be true. A lot of landlords, are trying to, I've seen a lot of landlords that try to make up certain things to try to get into the health and safety or say the health and safety claim. But So if you dispute that, you can certainly try to write a cure letter, notifying them that, the allegations are not true or that, they're false. It's probably better to not accuse the landlord of lying, just maybe tell them that they made a mistake or an error, that is not happening. Or if you agree that the stuff is happening, you can try, that they're accusing you of is happening. You could try to fix it, like say if there's, garbage out in the hallway, you could clean it up and then take pictures and write them a letter notifying them that you cured them. Again, they had 10 days notice, so that means that they have to give you at least 10 days before they can file an eviction. And you can go to the website rentervention.com for assistance in writing a cure letter to your landlord. Now, the termination of tenancy, laws regarding this vary between suburbs and state. If there is a lease, the landlord, it does not matter if you have a lease or there's no lease and the tenancy is month to month. Either way, the landlord must notify you in writing. If there's a lease and the lease is about to end, they have to notify you in writing that they do not intend to renew the lease or to continue the tenancy. If the tenancy is month to month, then the landlord must give you, so much notice for the termination of tenancy. And again, in Chicago, the length of the notice depends on your tenancy, the length of your tenancy, the number of days. In the suburbs, it's just 30 days. So you have 30 days up until the end of the next. So if they give you in the suburbs, if you're given a notice, say on August 1st for 30 days, then the tenancy will end August 31st. But if say they gave you a tenancy August 15th, then it would end September 30th as opposed to September 15th, because it needs to end at the end of the tenancy period, unless your tenancy period began in the middle of the month, which if these rules are confusing, might be better to try to consult with an attorney to just learn about your own specific scenario and your own specific case. And again, these tenancies, these termination notices, they must be in writing. The landlord can't just come up to you and say, hey, you have to be out in 30 days. They have to give it to you in writing. They can't send someone on their behalf or just tell you verbally. It must be in writing. And the same rules apply if the landlord wants to raise your rent. They have to give you notice in writing. Now, as in Chicago, the length of the notice depends on the length of your tenancy. So if you've lived in your current home for less than 6 months, then the landlord only needs to provide 30 days. If you've lived in your current premises between 6 months and 3 years, then they need to provide a minimum of 60 days notice. Now, again, this includes if the tenancy, if they don't intend to renew or if they're going to raise the rent, they need to give you this. And if you've lived there for more than 3 years, then they must provide you 120 days notice. If the landlord gives you the wrong notice, which a lot tend to do, the notice starts from the day you received it, but it extends to the correct number of days. So let's say you lived in a place for 4 years, you live in the city of Chicago, it's a month-to-month lease, and the landlord gives you a 30-day notice on August 1st, then you still have that 120 days, so through December 31st, to vacate. And for a termination of tenancy, the landlord does not need to have a reason to terminate the tenancy. He could just want to, he doesn't need a reason, but he needs to provide you these notices. And again, the same applies if they wish to raise the rent. Now, eviction filings, if the landlord does move forward with filing an eviction, then you must be served. Now, there's a couple ways you can be served. You can be served by the sheriff. You can be served by a special process server, which the special process server will probably just be, some random person knocking on your door asking for your name, or, they might come up to you on the street sometimes. It can be kind of strange, but that's how they operate. Or it can be by mail or by publication. If it's by publication, it's unlikely that you're going to know about it. A publication has to be the last effort, but publication usually means it's published at the courthouse, and they just hope that you walk by the courthouse and you see it, which you probably won't. The landlord cannot serve you himself, so if the landlord serves you the summons himself, he's not allowed to do that. I really recommend that if you are served, that you should just call an attorney right away to have your case assessed and see what your options are. There's a lot that can happen, and there's, you might have some defenses that you can go by or discuss with an attorney to learn more about your case. Now, what to expect on the first court date. There are 3 options you can choose from. The first option you can choose is the ERP program. It's called the Early Resolution Program. The second option you can ask for is for a continuance for an attorney. And the third option is a jury demand. Now, the first option is the Early Resolution Program. This is a good option. It's pretty decent if you want to try to reach a settlement or negotiate with your landlord, and if you think your landlord would be receptive to that. When that happens, you can ask the judge and let the judge know you want to go to ERP. And when you go, an attorney will meet with you and assess your case. And the attorney may provide, a brief service. Which means they'll just give you a little bit of advice about how you should move forward, and that will be it. They can offer to represent you in negotiating with the landlord only. That means that's called a limited scope representation. So they will not. So if negotiations fall through and they don't work out, that means they won't represent you for the rest of the case. They'll only represent you in negotiations. They can refer you to mediation, which means you and your landlord will have a mediator, and they're all on Zoom right now. So you'll be in a Zoom room and your landlord will be in a separate Zoom room, and there'll be a mediator who goes back and forth between you guys to learn a little bit about your grievances, and then hopefully come to a resolution. Or if they think you have a good case, and if it seems unlikely that the landlord would be willing to negotiate, and they think you have a good case with good defenses, they might refer you to their organization for full representation, or to another organization that they think might be good for your case. The second thing you can do is you can just ask for a continuance. This is good if you're already in the middle of trying to secure an attorney. And again, if you don't think that the landlord would be receptive to negotiations or settlement. Each judge varies. Some judges offer, 3 weeks. Some offer 1 week, but the average seems to be about 2 weeks that you'll be given a continuance to look for an attorney. And the third thing you can do is ask for a jury demand and transfer the case to a jury. Now, if you ask for this, it must be filed before you go to court. So it must be filed, say, like the day before or a few days before. The earlier, the better. And I have a link here where you can get a form jury demand. And it's easy. You can just fill it out. It's a PDF that you can fill out. And then you can file it with the clerk's office. And again, it must be, if it's on the first court date, you should be granted this jury demand. What we'll do is it will provide a lot more time before the next court date, and it changes the room to a jury room. So if the case does go to trial, you'll have a jury. It's a guaranteed right. So as long as you do it on the first court date, you should be able to have a jury. Right now, the jury demands do take a long time right now. Back in March, they used to take 3 to 4 weeks, but now I've had some cases that took like 2 months to go through. So if you're already planning to move out real soon and you just need more time, there's absolutely no chance to negotiate. It might be a good idea to just ask for a jury. Or if you need more than 2 weeks or want more than 2 weeks to find a lawyer, then again, it might be a good idea to ask for a jury. Now the bench trial, the next step would be the bench trial. If ERP does not work out and after your continuance, the judge has been transferring the cases over to a judge for trial. And if there's no jury demand, then there will be no jury. It will just be the judge at the bench. You should still try to ask for a jury first and have a jury filed. The judge may or may not reject the jury demand. Sometimes he'll grant it and allow to move to a jury, especially if it's the second court date. Sometimes he will reject it. It's kind of a gamble, but it's definitely worthwhile. You got nothing to lose by asking for a jury. Now, I don't think there's any way I could really go over every single thing when it comes to trial, because there's a lot of rules and processes. There's rules of civil procedure, there's rules of evidence, unfortunately, like the court system is very much like a game with a lot of rules. And if you don't know how to play the game, you don't really have a good chance. So that's why it's really important that you get a lawyer, because there's probably a lot of things in your case that can, either get you more time or possibly get the case dismissed, or if it's for money, possibly reduce what you might owe. So it's very important to consult with a lawyer before you go to trial. After the trial, now if the landlord wins, the judge will enter an order of possession and the sheriffs will come and evict you. You'll get a letter notifying you from the sheriff that they're going to come. It's unlikely that they'll tell you when they're going to come, especially in a lot of letters I've seen, they don't really seem to give a date. So it's not really knowable. You can also be liable for court costs and attorney's fees, which means you'll have to pay your landlord's attorney. So don't let him win. If you win, then the judge will dismiss the case. And I have some resources on here that you can reach out to. Lawyers Committee for Better Housing is the organization I work for. There's also Metropolitan Tenants Organization and Legal Aid Chicago. You can call all of those to try to obtain an attorney. Carpels is an organization. It's more if you can't obtain an attorney or you think you'll be fine without one. They'll walk you through every step of the process of litigation, and they'll be able to, advise you much better. If you're going to manage your own case, they'll be able to advise you a whole lot better every step of the way. And then Legal Aid Online is just another source you can go to for more like legal advice or research. And with that, I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Antoinette. And so we have a little bit of time. We have about 20 minutes, maybe slightly less, 18, 19 minutes for some questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start letting you all in as panelists. Very prestigious because it doesn't say allow panelists, it says promote to panelists. So I am promoting you one by one here to panelists, and I am going to next promote to a panelist. Let's see if I did it correctly. There's a little bit of a lag time I've noticed. Annie Howard, if you can hear me, you are a promoted panelist. A very proud moment for you, I'm sure. If you can hear me and want to have a couple of words, Annie, as I promote the other people, if you want to, I know you had to come in a little late. You told me about that. Thank you. And we've lost Reverend Campbell and a few other people that had something they had to get to at 7. But we talked a little bit about just cause for eviction. Sharon talked a little bit about that. But I don't know if you want to add a little more perhaps about kind of summing up the next few weeks in terms of we may have a chance to get this on the city of Chicago's radar as far as just cause for eviction. If you want to say a few words about that as I get the other people in as panelists so we can take other questions and comments. So this is Annie Howard. Annie is the main organizer with the Chicago Housing Justice League. So she's going to have a couple of words to say. Please go ahead, and I'll promote the rest of you.
Yeah, thank you, Leonie. So I don't want to say too much right now because I don't want to, I guess I'll just be careful in what I say. Just Cause is in a really pivotal moment. We have been working on this for quite a while in negotiation with the city, with various of our elected officials. We have about 12 co-sponsors who have been advocates for the bill over the last year. And then plenty of fence-sitters who are fundamentally not willing to understand the impact of eviction in their communities. And as we are facing the eviction moratorium, we're hoping that it's frustrating that the consequences of the end of the eviction moratorium are part of what is on our mind as we're advocating for just cause. I will say that we are soon going to be having some more sort of public demonstrations around just cause. We are planning for one in a few weeks. The details are still being hashed out, but it'll be in about 3 weeks on a Saturday. And it'd be really wonderful to have people there to join us. I'm gonna put in the chat right now. Hopefully everyone will see it. a URL which has information a little bit more about Just Cause. It's a petition link, so you can sign that to learn more about what we're doing. And then once you sign the petition, that will also give you email updates to let you know about future actions and other kind of action items that we're doing. So I don't want to take up too much more time, but you can definitely learn more there. I will also put my email in the chat. If anyone has follow-up questions, you can reach out and I'm happy to discuss further. So thank you very much, Leone.
No problem. Glad you could add a few words. So I believe I let everyone in or promoted people to panelists. I will try again. Some people didn't seem to come all the way in. So I'm going to ask a quick question as I go through this list again, and then we'll see if anyone wants to ask a question. But Sharon, you started out, and you don't have to add anything now, but you started out, and then Gianna and Antoinette, Annie added some words. I don't know if anything else came up that made you want to sort of add another comment to how we go about fighting evictions. If you want to add anything at this point, I'm gonna try to let some more people in.
Well, I think Gianna pretty much took it home, and then Annie just came in and pretty much explained the Just Cause and moving forward what we need and what we want from everybody. I think everybody just they did great jobs bringing that on home as well. I explained as much as I could to it, but if anybody have any questions that they want to ask me about my personal experiences and anything else, of course, feel free to jump right in.
Okay, so I think I'm doing the right thing by letting people in, but somehow some people seem to be coming in and others don't, but I'm going to keep going back through the list. So if you are a panelist and can ask it in your voice, or if you can hear me and you're not yet in as a panelist, if you want to type your question in or comment in the chat box, that would be great in English or Spanish. That would be terrific. So does anyone have any comment or question?
I just want to say thank you all for all of the great information that you provided today. Sharon, your story is very compelling, and I appreciate your openness and your honesty because I think it's a lot of people are facing similar situations. But there's so much information to take in. Will there be any materials that we have available that we can share with our members? So that they can have those additional links and phone numbers so that they can research any topic that is really specific to their situation.
Yes, and others can feel free to add if you want to send me any more, but thank you, Adriana. We will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone, and we will be sending out the presentation that Antoinette just gave now, that bilingual in English, Spanish, giving the basics of eviction court process and kind of how you can use that to slow things down, hopefully stop things. And in addition, I think Gianna had indicated that she would also send me something that I can put out as an attachment as well in that same email. And then I'll check with Sharon and we'll see if we want to add anything in there. But we'll be putting that out there. And again, please follow up with us. I think everyone who registered has my email as sort of the contact email. So please feel free. If something is not addressed, you just want to reach out to me. If I'm not the best person, I'll send you on to Sharon or another organization, or we'll try to get you in touch with someone. So I think, you know, what I'm reminded, a lot of us have been doing this work a long time. And so sadly, I didn't learn of it today, but I'm reminded when we look at the court eviction process, right? It's pretty dry and it's coming at you pretty quick, and you're at a big disadvantage when that hits. And I'm not trying to be negative. Why am I saying that? Is because, you know, it's kind of like in a football game or something. Once you're sweeping around that end and you got two people in the open field and they got a beat on you, you're in trouble. And what you needed was those blockers. And so I urge you not to, and what a lot of our members end up doing is they wait and wait and wait and wait until they're being evicted or until they're being fired from their jobs, instead of seeing the writing on the wall, right? And so what our job is as organizers is, you need to realize that most of us, people of color, we live in this crisis every day, right? It's not when COVID hits, when Katrina hits, you know, New Orleans, that's an extra crisis for us, right? It's crisis squared. So if we don't organize together every day, right, then when that next, you know, crisis hits, we're already 5 miles behind the landlord. We're already 5 miles behind the company. So use the eviction court process to learn, understand how you can fight. I urge you to do that accompanied by an organization. If you are not a member of a fighting organization, if you belong to a church, if you belong to anything you belong to, don't go it alone. Don't go it alone, right? Because most of these fights are won with a combination of legal strategy and community pressure. It's very rare that you just sort of win these great legal victories, right? Because the oppressors got a lot more money and they got a lot more lawyers. So we need to know the law to know how to fight. But then we have to have the strength to fight. And you're going to get that strength by being together with a whole bunch of other people who are in the same boat. So take the legal strategy, take the organizing, and don't say, well, I think I'm good. You're not good. You're not good. You're not going to be good tomorrow and next week, or someone in your family's not. So let's fight together before they come for us. And then unfortunately, that could be kind of soon. So let's all band together. I want to check to see, thank you very much though, Adriana. So we'll be sending stuff out. James, do you want to say anything? I'm gonna start bugging a couple of you because you're super eloquent. We only have about another 8-9 minutes, but and don't feel like you have to, James. Just, I respect your work so much. You don't live in Chicago, so it might be really cool to hear kind of your perspective on this national fight, because you're out on the East Coast. So we'd love to hear any words you have.
Okay, well,
and please
Leonie,
introduce yourself.
Sure. James Benton. I'm with the Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor, which is an organizing group that's based at Georgetown University in DC. And yeah, I'm glad to be here and to hear what all the panelists have said this evening. We're facing a similar situation in Washington. We have a tremendous housing affordability crisis that's been ongoing for decades. We have the moratorium coming to an end, although DC has a phased-in plan that delays the process for another 2 months. It's still going on. And, you know, a lot of people are facing some really, really dire situations right now, as they have been, as Gianna mentioned in her presentation. So again, Leonie, like you said, knowledge is a big thing. It goes a long way. So does organization. And you got to organize to beat this thing, to defend yourself as best you can if the landlord's coming after you. But no, I'm just really glad to see this type of organization in Chicago, in DC, in other cities all across the country, and wish you all the best of luck with what's coming ahead, because it's going to be brutal. It always has been brutal, but it's going to be really rough to come, unfortunately. So that's all I had to say. Again, it's a pleasure to hear what everyone had to say tonight, and to observe and to see how things are going on in Chicago these days.
Really appreciate it very much, James. I'm glad you could join. I know you joined last time, but I think you were en route here and there and used a phone, and we're in a car. But we're honored to have you with us. And actually, I will note that Adriana is actually on the line, Adriana Avila McClintock, and she's calling from Colorado. So actually a couple people are from some other places, but James is doing amazing work at the Kalmanovitz Institute at Georgetown University, and he's working with something that they've been rolling out nationally called the social contract, for a bunch of really important issues, and we will stay in touch with people on this panel and with people who've sent whose email we now have, and now you're going to be victims of our emails that come to you, but we're going to be letting you know about this because, again, I think what James and others have been trying to work on nationally, many great people, is don't wait for a crisis, right? We're in enough of a crisis in case any of us haven't noticed, and so let's take the initiative, right, so that we're ready. And these crises don't end up wiping us out.
Right.
Does anyone have another? We have a few more minutes for a question, a comment. I was going to say complaint, but I'd rather you call me privately. So question or comment. And if not, I'll probably figure something out in a second. I think some of the folks, I'm just going to guess, you can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. I've tried multiple times and I've promoted you as panelists, but you're not coming in. I'm gonna guess maybe you don't want to, maybe. I don't know. And you kind of like something pops up that says okay, and you're not clicking it, and that's fine too. That's totally fine. But if you do, and not everyone wants to be on the big screen or even have your name there. So if you want to ask something, feel free to type it in. If you have any questions, please do. Because I've tried with Anna, Clau, Eleuteria, Esmeralda, Gladys, Maggie. I've tried with all you guys, but you're not coming in, which is totally fine. I'm going to do this then, because we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to return to our three panelists, and I'm just going to check and let each of you, if it takes enough time, it might just end up being our last closing three comments. But Sharon, Gianna, Antoinette, you don't have to say anything, but I leave it to you before we do a brief closing. Any comment, anything you want to share, either information or any advice that you want to share with us before we go. Well, I'll help make it easier. We'll start with you, Sharon, if there's any last thing you want to share.
Yeah, of course. So basically, with Leonie sends out the email with all the contacts. Please, everybody, take a look at it, read over it, see what you, excuse me, can personally get involved with right now to try to slow this process down or completely stop it. Like I said, we got these bills that we have that are in place that we need passed. We need support. So look over it, and the information, you're going to be getting a lot of information on the things that you'll need to help get started with fighting to get these bills passed. And also take in mind, if you are in that situation to be evicted, you had some valuable information learned today. I wish I knew that at my time. I swear, if I would have known to do that at that time, it would have been amazingly different for me. So you had valuable tools that you have given to you that will be shared with you. Read over this stuff, take it into heart. And then, like I said, I have a saying, each one reach one so we can teach one. So if you know of somebody who's going through that, you can share this information with them as well. But more importantly, when you read this stuff and it's giving you links to talk to your elected officials about the situation, talk to your neighbors and everybody and get them involved so we can get things going to help with these bills being passed. That just cause, we need those things. And housing is a human right. It's a human right. We deserve better. And it takes not only me, not only Leonie, Gianna, or it takes all of us to work together to get this done. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sharon. And now we'll go to Gianna.
First of all, I just want to thank Leonie and Sharon again with Working Family Solidarity, and also Antoinette with Lawyers Committee for Better Housing, and even want to say with Lawyers Committee, I know that you all, as well as Housing Action Illinois, have been doing a lot of work for years on the issue of evictions. So just want to acknowledge that work that you've been doing, and then to echo what Leonie talked about, just the importance of working together to build power to deal with these issues. What I will say quickly too is that I, some years ago, was going through a financial crisis, and was able to get help through the state's homeless prevention program, and that kept me in a place living. And then from there, I had many opportunities to continue just working with advocates on housing justice. And so I would just say, you know, if there's any additional support that you need, or you just have any questions, please do reach out to me. One area that we've really have kind of focused on through COVID-19 is providing support to individuals with arrest and conviction records, even as some people were released early from prison and jail. And so we do have supports that we can connect you to, whether that's housing, employment, or other reentry services. But just feel free to reach out to me, and I just want to thank all of you.
Thanks a lot, Gianna. Thank you very much. Antoinette?
Sure, thank you, Gianna. So the PowerPoint will be emailed, and the follow-up email will be attached. It's in both languages, but again, the Spanish might be a little wonky. The law can only go so far to protect you. Like, sometimes there are cases, unfortunately, that are just lost causes just because of the way the law is. And so we cannot always rely on the law to protect us. And it's very important that's why it's even more important for us to have solidarity and friendship and solidarity, frankly, with our neighbors and other tenants and the people around us, because there are definitely situations where having that solidarity with your neighbors and with other tenants that is going to protect you more than the law. And that's why it's very important that we all stick together.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's pretty clear. I think we've seen this in our teach-ins and in so many other great organizations' teach-ins, where we have to know our rights to start. And then once we do, we kind of go, is that it? We don't have a lot of rights, right? So part of knowing our rights is knowing the tools that we can use to defend ourselves, but it also becomes, unfortunately, enlightening to realize in many cases, we have very few rights, right? Like, if the land value goes up in your area, you don't have the right to say, well, how about if the millionaire pays more for property taxes and I pay less, and then our area still pays the same amount and I don't have to be gentrified out? Well, you don't have that legal right, but it feels right, right? So we have so much work to do. So as we move ahead, and people have already said it, so I just want to encapsulate, we're going to end now, but let's remember, let's learn, you know, we have 2-3 weeks. Landlords in Illinois, and some of you sadly may know this from personal experience, they're filing eviction orders now, this week, last week, right? They're getting ready, and they have you in their crosshairs. And we've talked to people in our organization, and I bet you have too, whose landlords are using this moment to push people out to then have other folks come in who make more money and will pay higher rent. So there's someone who is behind $5,000, then $4,000, $3,000, $2,000, right? They're working their way back, and they're almost caught up, and you can see they're going to catch up. And landlords are going, I want you out because you pay $1,200, and I'm gonna get someone who's gonna pay $1,800, right? And so, you know, this is where we need to be organized all of the time, but the laws are also very helpful. I don't want to be too negative. We need much better laws, but there are many times cases where we can find that law and find that little bit of a tool that we can use to fight back. The protected classes that Gianna talked about. The landlord did everything right, but they forgot that they never actually gave you a written contract when you started there. Aha, now you have something to talk to the judge about, right? So we can find those little things to slow things down while we push for your rights as a person and a family. But then we also, like Sharon was saying, we need everyone to help. And sometimes you may look and say, well, the lawyers and sort of the professional organizers can sort of do that. We can't do that. We actually can't do it. We have a lot of confidence, and we're really tired of all this crap. So we're going to keep fighting. But like Sharon and others have said, the meat of this fight is you. If you're listening and you get up early in the morning and you work all day, and I know some of y'all, and then you get home late at night, right? You're the person that's going to have to lead this. You're the person that's going to have to lead this, right? You may not like that. That's what you got. Okay? We need you. Please, when you get the follow-up email, bug us, bother us, and let's fight on this together. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to our panelists, to Sharon, to Gianna, to Antoinette. I also want to thank our interpreters from Somos Sur, We Are the South, Eva and Crystal. I want to thank Adriana for piping in from Colorado. I want to thank James for joining us from Washington, D.C. And I know a lot of the others here. Thank you so very much for being with us. Muchísimas gracias a todos. We're going to take a break in August, and we've done 12 teachings in 12 months. So we're going to take a break and give all the people who tune in a minute to not bug them every week for a little while. And then we'll return to bugging you soon. But you'll get the follow-up email soon. Thank you so much. And let's keep fighting together. And I wish you a really, really great evening. Que tengan muy buenas tardes. Thank you, everyone.